If you were an only child growing up, have you ever had to put up with sibling rivalry? I know I did, and I wish I didn't. It can range from annoying horseplay to arguments that really chuck the rocks at the heart. But what I dealt with was much more serious than that. It ended up having me separated from my brother, between a barrier of our own hatred for the longest time. And to think that I could have prevented this if I wasn't such an audacious jerk. I always wanted to be an animator growing up. After so much work putting into college, the arts of coloring, sketching, and polishing my craft, I was finally ready to put my all into my passion project. For a while now, I dreamt of showcasing my animation to the higher-ups at big companies to see if I'm good enough or if there's anything I need to change. I had plans to make adult cartoons as well as adverts, but I wanted to start off with something simple first, that being educational programming. That's why I started my development on a pitch pilot for Noggin. Man, I'm getting sentiment just talking about this. The name of the show was Penelope Park, and like a lot of educational programming, it was meant to teach kids about basic concepts that they're trying to get the hang of, such as their ABCs, numbers, shapes, etc. During development, I had limited tools to work with. I had made the mistake of taking out loans for college at the time, and spending hefty amount of money for a better setup was out of the question. So I decided to just stick with my graphics tablet, cheap softwares for both sound and animation, and my desktop microphone. It's a good thing that a girl from my class opted to voice act. I promised her that she would get paid by the reps if they thought she was, quote-unquote, good enough. Which, looking back, made me sound like a dick. Thankfully, we still keep in contact, but I'll keep her anonymous for the sake of her not getting her inbox blown up. I also had a friend from filmography class help me to shoot each scene. Kudos to him. Now, you may be wondering, what does all this have to do with my brother? Colin, my sibling, took the same class as I did, but he ended up dropping out. When I asked my professor, he said that it was because of, quote-unquote, stress. Now, I know that wasn't the case at all. Fast forward to when I showed the pilot to a test group, I took deep breaths and reassured myself that things were going to work out in the end. And after all, the worst thing they could have told me is that this cartoon sucks. And I knew they weren't going to say that, as I spent sleepless nights trying to perfect it. I did a short slide presentation about what I had in mind for the series, along with some business stuff, like why I chose Noggin to work for. Finally, I rolled the film, and it showed them the progress I had garnered over the past 3 months. The pilot just started how I remembered it, a view of my basement interior, full of toys, play sets, and of course, a dollhouse, which is where the main character came into play. Penelope came right out of the door, and the key on her back would turn with glee, ready to meet the audience. The test group seemed to like her design a lot, along with the mixture of 2D and live action. Penelope squeals with excitement. Oh my stars! A new friend! Hi there! Super duper happy to meet ya! My name's Penelope. What's your name? 3 seconds of silence ensue. That's such a cool name. I got a feeling we're gonna be best pals by the end of today. There's so much little time, yet so much to do. So many fun games to play, and lots of memories to make. I'd love to have a partner to do all that fun stuff with me. Maybe you can. What do you say? Another second of silence. I knew you'd be on board. Oh, we're gonna have such a fantastic time together. Follow me. I'll show you around. Penelope started to walk around the setting, to where the less of a basement and more like a village playset. There were little stores surrounding her, an empty fountain, and of course, a park, topped with all sorts of activities. This is where the learning portion of a pilot begins. At this point, Penelope talks to the viewer about what kind of stuff they can do until the end of the day. She exclaims that they made it to the park, and she informs the viewer that they can have a break between playtime. After practically frolicking over to the area, the following events ensue. The first activity is hopscotch, but with numbers. Penelope tells the viewer that she isn't the greatest at this game because square placement always gets her confused, so he asks you for help. She ends up mastering the game in the end, and all is well. Next is an imagination sequence on the playground. The viewer gets to play pirates with Penelope, and she pretends that there is an enemy boat trying to raid them. In this scenario, there is a net cannon in the bottom of the ship, but a passcode is required. Instead of numbers, the lock has pictures of things that would be on a pirate ship. Once they finally get to the net cannon, and fire at the enemy pirates with it. She celebrates with a sea shanty dance before the screen fades back to the playground. Afterwards, Penelope will tell the viewer that Playtime, quote-unquote, really works up some muscle, and asks you if you'd like to take a break. She then heads over to a bench with sketch pads on them. Penelope suggests drawing domestic animals, as she thinks that they're really cute. She starts off by sketching a simple visual of a puppy, and she asks you if you like it. When it's the viewer's turn to draw a cat, there are a few gags that would end up drawing something that isn't an animal, making Penelope laugh and joke around with you. After a few attempts, the viewer finally draws a cat, and Penelope compliments their work. Penelope talks about how they still have some time left, but she can't come up with anything else to do. A small wind-up duckling toy suddenly shows up, and waddles along Penelope's leg, catching her attention.
Oh, it's you! New pal, this is my good friend, Lucky Ducky. He usually comes by to give us some cool stuff to do. What's on your mind, Lucky?
The toy starts front flipping in a place a couple of times before stopping. At this point, there is a lengthy moment of silence. At first, I thought that the video was bugging out, but it couldn't have been if there wasn't any white noise playing. As far as I know, I didn't remember adding that at all. I thought I could fix that later, so I didn't have to worry about that too much. Until the camera cuts to Penelope's face, her eye twitches a little, and she began speaking in a quiet tone.
Are you even real?
Just as she was saying that, her sentence is cut off by the scene where Lucky Ducky walks away from their direction, prompting Penelope and the viewer to follow him. That was really weird. And I know for certain I never told a voice actor to say that, but I tried to keep calm and collected. After that, I could just explain myself to the group later, right? Lucky Ducky leads Penelope and the viewer to a big shot playset with no staff, filled to the brim with musical instruments. Her eyes light up as she skips around the room laughing, talking about how she can't wait to make music with you. She points to the instrument catalog on the wall and asks if the two of you can play brass together, assuming that you told her yes. She grabs a map and makes her way through the shop with you. There's lots of doors to go through to find the one with brass instruments, and in order to find the exact one, she has to go through a pattern of doors with shapes on them. The pattern to get to the brass room is square, circle, triangle, circle, triangle. Once she reaches to the room, she plays Mary Had a Little Lamb with the viewer. She marches around the room as she's playing the song, with the key on her back winding up the more as she stops. This is where I saw another thing I didn't add. The screen paused for a moment and replayed the scene where she marched around the room on loop, but it was grayscaled. A different song would play instead, and it sounded like it came from a funeral service. A picture of a note suddenly popped up on my screen. A song about your career. Smiley face. The scene then cut back to Penelope and the viewer left the music place. I know for certain that I didn't put that in, and the audience was just as lost as I was. But I couldn't stop the video. I had to know what else was wrong with it, and what else could have caused these messages to pop up. After talking about how fun it was to play with the trumpet, Penelope yawns and stretches.
Well, that was quite the fun day. But boy, am I beat. A dolly needs to relax. Ready to head home?
She extends her arm out and smiles. A few seconds of silence ensues.
Okay, sweet. Though, on the way home, I got something to share with ya. A little ditty for my best pal. You were so nice, so patient, and so kind to me. And what better way to show my thanks than through song?
As she makes her way back to her dollhouse with the viewer, she starts singing and dancing. A jazz number plays as she describes the fun day they had in alphabetical order, saying things like A is for amazing and F is for friend. Finally, after the song ends, Penelope stops in front of her house and gives the viewer a big hug, pressing her face against the screen. I was hopeful, and I started worrying less about the previous problems that went down. The pilot was reaching the end, and nothing too out of the ordinary seemed to happen so far. I thought that way too soon. Just as Penelope was about to say goodbye to the viewer, so the credits could roll, the video froze again. I checked to see if the video was paused, and no, it wasn't. The video still played. And there were about 7 more minutes left in the time slot. I remember the credits only being 2 minutes long. It finally unpaused. And while the art style looked the same, the animation was slightly choppier.
Come inside. I have a book to finish if you want to read with me. No?
Penelope was clearly dejected after she said that, but she didn't seem to stop smiling yet. No, this wasn't supposed to happen, I thought. This wasn't the ending I put in. I started to wonder what the hell this was supposed to mean.
Are you sure you don't want to hang out some more? I'm always sitting in this basement by myself with no one to talk to. And since you showed up, I thought we'd, have some more time to ourselves. Why do you have to go already? Are you sure you don't want to sit on my couch and read some Macbeth?
The camera shook left to right, as if the audience was telling her no. Penelope shivers as the sounds of heartbeat are all that could be heard around her voice.
Please, don't leave me here. I don't want to go through another 5 years of seeing no one. Please stay.
The viewer declines.
I get it. If you need something to make your stay worthwhile, I get it. You want another hug? A kiss even?
Another decline. Tears well up in Penelope's eyes.
No? What about a piece of my dress? If you're going to leave me rotting for another half a decade, at least carry a piece of me with you. I want to experience the real world in some way.
The viewer continues to shake their head. Even while knowing that this was part of my creation, I still ask myself, what in the fresh hell am I looking at? Penelope continued ripping off her chunks of her dress, now begging the viewer to say something other than no. She then drops her torn cloth and puts on an angry look.
If you leave, I will hurt myself! You hear me? I'm not joking!
Penelope screamed at the viewer, and the heartbeat sound effects sped up. Screeching sounds that were akin to nails on a chalkboard, along with loud bass boost rumbles played too. To prove that she wasn't lying, she began to mutilate herself. She started with her button eyes, yanking them out until stuffing flew, and loose pieces of string poked out of where her eyes once were. She grabbed onto the side of her mouth and slowly tore it off. A few snapping sounds could be heard, but she stopped a third of the way through. Since she was blind, she ran her hands around her back, groaning in pain, looking for her wind-up key. Once she found it, she yanked onto the key 3 times before finally tearing it out of her. Penelope lets out a scream so loud that it sounded like it came from a slasher flick. She stabs herself in the upper body with the key before grabbing fistfuls of stuffing and throwing them on the ground. She'd stop and gasp for breath before yelling at the viewer, "Stay! Please! Stay! Nothing is real! Nothing here can talk to me! I need you! Stay!" I didn't even sit through the next 5.5 minutes to see what else would happen. I closed the video and pulled out my USB drive right then and there. I tried to explain to the lead representative that I never put those scenes in the pilot, that he doesn't believe me, but he kept calm and showed me the way out of the building. I instantly rang up to my classmate on the way home and asked if she tampered with the film. She said she'd never do that, and when I informed her of what happened in the pilot, she told me that someone else called her, claiming to be the co-director. She was requested to come over and record some lines while I was out getting groceries, because the project was suddenly switched to be pitched as an adult show last minute. Needless to say, I knew who told her all of that. I stormed into my house, barking at Colin. I was so angry that I couldn't even think straight. And I felt like passing out right there from how hard I yelled at him. He told me everything, and he was honest about all of it. I didn't truly help Colin growing up. My mother and father apparently saw me as the better child, and I was too dense to even see it until now. From school to college, I constantly wanted to work alone, and I kept pushing him away from when he needed help with his studies. He forced himself to work on school stuff alone as a result. And even then, our parents only noticed my work. He only got their attention when he made a bad grade or his behavior worsened in class. When he found out I was working on this animation project, he dropped out just to find the right time to mess with my work and pray to God that I didn't notice. I didn't even know how to respond. I was still pissed beyond belief. But what he said really hit me. He was right. I really wasn't there to help him when he truly needed it. And now, look what happened. I didn't even give a rebuttal. I stormed right out of the house and drove to my classroom's door. She helped me calm down, and I can't thank her enough for that. When I arrived back at my house, my brother was gone, and he took some of his stuff with him. His clothes, his wallet, mainly the most important things he has. My parents told me that they had tried to stop him, but he insisted on leaving. In case if anyone is wondering, Colin is fine. He was good friends with a dude from my animation class all those years ago, and he seems to have been living a good life. As for the animation, I didn't lose it, but I don't want to upload it. It'll just remind me of the ordeal I went through with my brother. I just hope that one day we could put this past aside and show each other how much we've grown. I'm sorry, Colin.